Sometimes, late at night, I think about all the stories my parents used to tell, and the strange things they tell me not to do. No cutting your nails and not throwing the clippings away. Don't whistle at night. No closing the door with the fan blowing directly on you. Don't stop to talk to any women on your way home at night. But these are all superstitions, old tales of their childhood, but occasionally, when I stayed alone, they resurfaced in my head at night. Superstitions made me a careful, almost rigid child, an adult, until meeting Jay. He was everything I wasn't, lax, stress-free, and had a fairly loose upbringing. When I became fearful, he was always there for me, except the last few days due to a business trip. It had been 3 days since Jay had left, and it was already wreaking havoc on my sleep schedule. It was the third night in a row that I had watched the sunrise and listened to the birds chirping in the morning. I whistled to keep my head clear while I usually skimmed through a book I had already read. While the first night was entertaining, to say the least, on account of me binge watching a few shows, I was already starting to get bored of my newfound freedom. As head lawyer on a recent case, Jay claimed the negotiations were going well, and that the matter would be resolved quickly, but that didn't seem to be the case until I heard a soft chuckle from the hall that connected my living room to the kitchen. Taking a swig of Earl Grey and whistling a little tune, I turned around, questioning whether I had really heard something. Jay was notorious for pulling pranks on me at all times of the day. We'd replace ingredients in foods, plant tape recorders around the house that played strange noises, or even sneak into the house quietly and sneak up on each other. Of course I was reigning champ, but Jay wasn't convinced. Being known for coming home early and not telling me, I readily assumed that it was him. As I got up slowly, I heard the noise again. This time I could tell that it was a laugh, but it didn't sound like Jay's. Had I left the TV on again? I set my tea down on the table, wrapped my robe around me a bit tighter, and began walking around down the hallway. When I got to the living room, the TV wasn't on, but I could still hear laughter. But instead of coming from the hallway, it sounded as if it were coming from above. Was I hearing things? I counted the number of shoes at the door because, prank or not, Jay was a stickler for taking his shoes off when entering the house. One pair was missing. I peered out the window. No car, no tire tracks. Fear started settling in a bit when I heard another gregarious laugh coming from the top of the stairs. Taking a few deep breaths, I slowly turned around and saw that the attic door appeared to be a bit open and light shone through. Looking around, I grabbed one of my golf clubs and walked slowly up the stairs. The laughter continued, but this time I heard a voice speak. Jay, you're so silly. I froze. I said that to him earlier, that night on the phone. It continued, but this time switching the order of the words. So silly, Jay. So silly. Silly Jay. The voice sounded akin to a woman's voice, but with a strong accent, similar to my mother's. The closer I got to the door, the more I heard her recite my previous conversation with Jay. I love you, you know that, right? At this point I was kicking myself big time. Of all the times to keep my phone charging upstairs, it had to be now. Between my bedroom was the attic door, but so were the extremely creaky floorboards. It was either making a run for it and giving away that I was upstairs, or facing whoever was repeating my conversations in the attic. We were the only house in a few miles, and I wasn't about to walk a few minutes to the neighbor's house over something I wasn't even sure I'd heard. Ah, to hell with it. I'll just close the attic door, lock it, make a run for it. I extended my arm to see the golf club would reach, but it was too short. Looking around for a longer instrument of sorts, my eyes began to follow the footprints that I couldn't see from the bottom of the stairs. I kid you not, there were muddy shoe and handprints on the second floor window to my left, and the window was wide open. Handprints that went up the walls and into the attic. She, he, or it hadn't used the retractable stairs, they climbed up walls, which in an odd way would explain why I never heard the attic door fully open. Looking down now at something on the floor, my eyes focused to see the missing pair of shoes now muddy but neatly placed under the stairs. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I backed up slowly, trying to slip down the stairs quietly, when I started to hear an engine running. My eyes widened. The floorboards started to creak again. "Sean, I love you too, Sean." Hearing it recite more words, I started to creep faster down the stairs, backwards now, trying to keep an eye on the attic door. Just as I got to the middle of the stairs, I heard the front door slowly creak open and someone whistling. My head whipped around to see Jay walking up the walkway. Backing up faster to reach him, I started to hear a loud wrestling, almost as if it were knocking things over upstairs. I bolted down the stairs, and was almost at the bottom by the time the door had opened, creaking, intensifying with every step. "Babe?" Jay questioned, head tilted. After the sound of the door, for an odd few seconds, the house was dead quiet. Again, I began back down the last few stairs, holding my breath. Jay spoke again, this time louder now. "Sean!" I swung my head back towards him in an effort to silence him. When the attic door slowly began to open, I could see small white fingers coming from the entrance. I turned around and began grabbing Jay's arm in the process. He fell forward, and the door slammed behind him. Running through our yard, I continued to grab his arm and run towards our gravel driveway, periodically peering up to see the window on the side of our house in the process. After being some distance away from the house, I finally loosened my grip on his jacket. "Babe, is there someone in the house?" he questioned, looking at me frantically. At this point I was speechless. I simply pointed towards the window, which from the outside appeared to be closed. Rubbing my eyes, I continued to stare at the house bewildered, trembling. Seeing that I was clearly shaken, Jay directed me towards the car and drove me to the nearest neighbor's house a few minutes away, while calling the cops. He ultimately went down to meet cops alone at the house. At this point my memory gets a tad fuzzy due to lack of sleep, but I remember this clearly. The police couldn't find anything. Nothing, not even the shoes. We eventually returned home after a day or two in which I thought my mother deserved a call. The conversation was normal until I began to tell her about the experience, and that's when she fell silent. "I told you not to whistle," she breathed out. To which I asked her why, because even though I was still deathly afraid, I needed to know what I'd seen. "Because whistling invites the spirits."